This is Tony Hendrick with Painting Spirit, and today's subject is going to be altered states. And I had that word come to me last night, kind of out of the blue, so I decided to make it the subject today. And whenever I have something like that come to my mind, I like to look up the definition. And so I looked it up because what my mind goes to with altered states is my brother really got into a movie in the 70s called Altered States, so I really didn't know the definition. Anyway, the definition reads like this: a state of mind that differs from the normal state of consciousness, typically one induced by drugs, hypnosis, or mental disorder. So, the reason I like to look up definitions of words is because it really gives me an idea of what kind of hypnosis I'm under based on cultural beliefs. And it's very obvious from this definition that having an altered state of consciousness is something negative. Associating it with drugs, hypnosis, or mental disorder. And it's really, when the word came to my mind, I wasn't really thinking of it in those terms. I was thinking of it more in how my state of consciousness is shifting all the time throughout the day. And, another aspect of this definition that they use is the word normal. I really don't know what normal is. I didn't look up that definition. That'd be a fun one to look up. Like, who decides what's normal, right? So I'm going to replace that word normal with two other words to talk about this today. And those two other words would be common or healthy. And maybe even instead of healthy, maybe a better word would be coherent. And coherent basically is saying that, we don't really have analog signals in the airwaves anymore, but you used to have a TV with antenna, and you'd try and tune in the signal, and it would be staticky. It would be an incoherent signal, and then all of a sudden the picture comes in clear, and that's coherency. That's basically what coherency is. And so healthy is the same way in my mind. Our body, when it's healthy, it's a coherent operating body. Anyway, so what does all this have to do with art, and why did I come up with this idea last night? And I was really thinking about, well, actually two things. I'm working on a painting right now, and I noticed that I can look at it. It's a commissioned painting, and I can look at it at certain times and it'll look completely different to me. And it's really just because my state of consciousness is changing. The painting isn't changing. Well, it is when I'm working on it, but when I'm looking at it, I haven't actually painted on it in the last couple of days because I'm kind of letting it set for a little bit as I play around with my state of consciousness around it. And I think this is a common thing for artists working on their paintings, is you can go into an altered state working on the painting. You literally are altering your state of consciousness when you're doing that. And I've personally experienced really a heightened awareness of color and a vibrancy in my own state of being. So to me, that's a healthy shift in consciousness, because I feel more alive, I feel more vibrant, I feel more happy, joyful. All of those things to me are coherent and healthy. And let's just play around here, kind of get myself into this painting a little bit. I'm actually in an altered state of consciousness to my normal state of consciousness with painting while doing these videos, because I'm talking while painting, which isn't my norm, my personal norm anyway. And everybody has their own personal way of altering their state of consciousness, and I have no judgments about that. I personally like the variety in our world. So some people might use drugs. It might not even be a negative for them. Maybe hypnosis is your thing. Maybe mental disorders your thing. Or, there's, you have your Netflix state of consciousness, your iPhone state of consciousness, your walk in the park state of consciousness. That's one of my go-tos. Alters my state of consciousness. It's all kind of happening within, isn't it? And I know that because my walks in nature. I have a farm lane right out my back door that I can go for walks. Goes back to the sugar bush. That's the maple trees back in the woods. And I've noticed that the woods, well, they do change. Everything's changing in nature all the time. But, the lane, I walk down the lane, and it really depends on where my state of consciousness is. It's not about going for the walk, because I've walked down that lane many times, and sometimes I'm really feeling like crap, and other times it's like, oh, this is the greatest thing. So, and the same thing happens when we're painting. And becoming aware of that you're actually altering your state of consciousness, you can start to choose which one you want, right? And so, going back to looking at this painting that I'm working on, this commissioned painting, the tendency with a commissioned painting is to go into thinking about what the person you're doing the artwork for is going to think of it, which definitely changes your state of consciousness from when you're actually working on it. And so looking at it like, well, which one is the more coherent state of consciousness? Is it the one where I'm judging it, trying to think of what somebody else is going to think of it? It doesn't feel so healthy to me. It doesn't feel so good to me because I can feel the tension in that. And a lot of times the painting doesn't look so good when I'm in that state of mind. Let's see here, what can we do? Let's bring in some darks. Okay, so I'm working wet on wet here. I'm kind of wanting to get this something to... So I'm using a lighter brush here, or a softer brush. And I'm just gently touching the paint with this white. Just gently, because that allows the paint to kind of sit on top of this other wet paint. Otherwise, it's going to get me doing this. It's going to get the paint all muddy. I've used a lot of colors close together here. I'm kind of enjoying just this different style of painting that I'm doing today. So my subject is this altered state. And I think I pretty much got to the place where I was wanting to head with that. I know if you've painted, even if you haven't, I know maybe many of you who are watching these aren't necessarily watching them to learn how to paint, but maybe just to enjoy an altered state. Watching the painting change. Let's bring in some reds here. Let's see what happens with that. Oh, that was nice. Kind of liked that. See what happens when I bring some more in. Kind of scrape that paint away. And then I'm wiping that extra paint that kind of got on my brush onto a rag to get, so you could see it's going through this blue. Kind of scraping that off. Now I got the blue on my brush, so I just take it and I wipe that off. Dip it in a little medium and wipe it off again. Basically, I'm just sort of cleaning off the brush so it doesn't get so muddy. Now that I got that red there, I'll go on top of that. Some orange. Anyway, I think that was pretty direct with what I was wanting to talk about. Just be aware that your state of consciousness can be either healthy, or it can be common. And maybe common isn't always the most healthy state of consciousness, is it? So, choose the one you want while you're painting. Get out your brushes, whether you're painting on a canvas or painting your life, and we'll see you tomorrow.